Charles Darwin wrote a book. The first words that we all know are the origin of the species. Now, would someone please read out loud the rest of that title? Quickly, can someone look that up?
On the origin of species by means of natural selection or the preservation of favored races in the struggle for life.
Oh, and do you know what Charles Darwin writes in that book? He writes, baboons, chimpanzees, Negroes, and Australian Aborigines are lower levels of this evolutionary cycle, and we do know the Western white European race ultimately will survive.
You mentioned that there's a certain intellectual inconsistency,
Right.
with having moral relativist beliefs, or at least objective moral or objective morality is
Right.
inconsistent with atheism.
Correct.
But I think I would say that I still have moral beliefs. I wouldn't necessarily call them like morally relativist or anything like that.
Okay.
But I think because of biology, we have a reason to do a thing that looks a lot like morality, which is care about one another, care about the success of humanity as a species, and that has shown itself in a thing that we now call ethics and morality. So how is that like intellectually inconsistent, I guess? Like what's wrong with just saying that morality does exist, it's not necessarily objective?
I've got no problem with an atheist who says morality's relative and I create my own morality. That's consistent. Where it turns inconsistent is, and my morality is the right one. My understanding of good and evil is correct. And if you contradict me, you're wrong. Baloney. If morality is relative, you believe something is moral today, you believe tomorrow it's immoral, no problem. It's all relative. If you think abusing children is wrong today, and you think tomorrow that abusing children is right, no problem. It's all relative. Just try and live that out. And you can't live it out. Now, my point is real simple, guys. You know very well that I've stood out here now for a lot of hours with Stuart, and we have both claimed we follow Jesus Christ. If after I finish speaking here, you watch me go out and womanize, what are you going to call me? Thank you. And that is a compliment. Because what you're saying is, Cliff, I took you seriously when you said you're a follower of Christ. And now you're finished speaking out here, and you're going to go out and womanize? You call me hypocrite, and you're right. I'm a hypocrite. Similarly, you tell me you're an atheist, that you believe morality is relative, but then you hold to these objective morals that you've created in your head, and I'm going to call you intellectual hypocrite. The same way if I say I'm a follower of Christ, and I go out and womanize, you're right. I'm a hypocrite. I'm not living out what I say I believe. Make sense?
Yes, I think I slightly disagree with part of the premise, being that I believe that murder is, it's sort of a semantic issue, wrong. But when I say wrong, what I mean is I believe that nobody should murder. And so I will treat someone differently if they murder someone because I believe they should not do that. But the reason I believe everybody should not do that is because I think humans are wired, from a biological sense, to think murder is wrong because we want humans to reproduce. That's why we have certain biological things like a community building instinct or like a sex drive or something like that. Humans are wired to want to coexist with other humans and bring humanity up, which is why I will always say that child abuse is bad, and I will always say that murder is bad. My morals are not relative. I don't think just because I believe that murder is bad, that if you believe murder is not bad, you're suddenly correct. My morals are rigid. I just don't think they're objective.
Okay, so I would call you an arrogant, rigid twit. You're telling me morality is relative, but I'm so rigid, Cliff, that if you disagree with me, I'm going to tell you you're wrong. Well, who on earth do you think you are? You're no better than me. And if I think that murder is good, I'm not wrong in any real sense. So I like the way you said, I'm just being rigid. Yeah, well, I don't think that's very tolerant. I don't think that's very open-minded. If you believe it's really all relative and you and I disagree, you're not going to tell me I'm wrong, because that's being arrogantly rigid. I mean, it's like, why is murder wrong? Because I'm an American. We Americans believe that murder's wrong. Big whoop. So what if you're an American? If you come from a different culture and you think that murder's good, then for you it's good. And if there is no God, morality is based on the individual, the culture, the power elite, or it's based on God. Those are the only four options, guys. If you know a fifth, please tell me. Now, if there is no God, morality is relative, which means it's all a crapshoot. Now, study the Nuremberg trials. Those Nazi officers hired some brilliant Nazi lawyers. And right in the middle of the Nuremberg trials, the Nazi lawyer said to the Allied judges, "You're coming from a different culture into Nazi Germany, and you're judging these Nazi officers who gassed Jews. They only gassed Jews because their commanding officers ordered them to. They were simply carrying out orders. Who on earth do you think you are as allies coming from the United States, from other European countries, coming into Nazi Germany and telling us Nazis that to gas Jews is wrong?" And the Nuremberg trials shut down until Robert Jackson, the American consul, stood up and said, "Excuse me, there is a law above the law of culture, and according to that law, it is evil to gas Jews." And the Nuremberg trials kicked back in, and justice was served. The lawyer was correct. If there is no God, and if morality is culturally defined, who on earth do you think you are to come from your culture and tell me and my culture that I'm wrong? And if I happen to grow up in a Nazi culture and we gas Jews, that's our culture. And if we happen to live 200 years ago in the United States and we have slaves, who on earth are you to come in and tell me that slavery's wrong? You're a rigid, arrogant twit. You're bringing your culture in, your biases, and trying to lay them on me. But if there is a God who is just and who's created all of us with a conscience and a rational mind, who is eternal and whose character is good, which means God's character defines justice and goodness, then it is totally possible to stand outside of culture and critique culture. And guess who I respect most? Gandhi. Gandhi chose to contradict his culture. Sute, the burning of a widow on her dead husband's funeral pyre, is wrong. Where did Gandhi get his understanding that the caste system was wrong? Not from the Vedas, Upanishads, and Bhagavad Gita. He got it from the Sermon on the Mount, where we read that God is a separate, eternal being who is good and just, and he's created and defined a value of justice and human dignity. I respect Abraham Lincoln. And what did he go through? The Civil War. What a horrible mess. But he followed his conscience instead of following his culture. I think that's reality. If you disagree, I respect your right to disagree, but I would say you're wrong.
You said that if God does not exist, then life is a crapshoot.
Correct.
Morally speaking.
And meaning?
Generally.
Meaning?
Right, meaning. So,
just about every way.
Right. I would disagree, and I think that's where the root of the biology argument is.
Okay.
For me, at least, is that even if I were to find out tomorrow by some miracle, hypothetically, that God for sure does not exist, not saying that that's possible.
Yes.
I would say that I would not lose my sense of morality, because no matter whether or not God exists, the thing inside of me that would love for every human to live a full life and have children and have those children grow up, that intrinsic desire is still there. And so I don't think life becomes a crapshoot morally if God does not exist. Meaning is slightly separate. I think that's probably the most terrifying thing about not believing in God.
Good.
I also think that's probably the root of my skepticism, is how terrifying that is, because my first thought when I hear that is that religion feels to me, not that it is, but feels to me like possibly a very convenient human invention to get around this.
Very good.
And I think that is the biggest barrier to faith for me, is the desire that I have to help other people. I don't think comes from God. And so if my presupposition is that God exists, well then, or that God does not exist, then everything about God and religion feels to me a lot more like a convenient human invention with all of the misgivings that come with it being a human invention.
And then there's another bias. And that bias is, I'm an independent, autonomous All-American. I don't need your help. I don't need God's help. I do it all on my own. Don't tread on me. I'm a free, autonomous individual. Therefore, quite naturally, I reject God. Because God is an intervention in my life. God's obnoxious. God's a tyrant. Believing in God is like wanting to live in North Korea and have a dictator tell me everything to do. I don't want to have a dictator in North Korea tell me how to live my life. I don't want to have God tell me how to live my life. Okay, that's a real bias in my life. I don't want God telling me how to live my life. I want to determine how I'm going to live my life. And I would argue that is exactly what Jesus Christ pointed out. We all have an innate bias against God. But you also make another point. No, Cliff, I think the opposite is true. I think we have a bias to believe in God. I would argue, no, I have a bias not to believe in God, but the evidence of my experience when it comes to morality, when it comes to meaning, when it comes to rational thinking, that drives me to God, because it's overwhelmingly obvious that in order for meaning, morality, reason to be real, there's got to be some mind behind me who created me. And I would argue that on a daily basis, my innate bias is, get lost, God. Get lost, police. I'm driving down the road. I'm breaking the speed limit. I see that cop car, and you know what happens. I hit the brake because I don't want to get a ticket. But as soon as that police is out of there, I'm back up to whatever. I'm a rebel. Comes very naturally to me. I don't have to work on it. I am a sinner. I need God's grace. I need His love. I need His forgiveness. I need His help, because I am a self-centered twit too often.
I think what you said about sort of the questions lead you to God, the questions of morality and the question of purpose, stuff like that.
Yep.
I think that's where I find the difficulty in. I have those questions, obviously. I think everybody has those questions. And what I see as my biggest two options are, at least in the instances in which they contradict each other, science and religion, to some extent.
Okay.
And I find that science, or rather some sectors of academia, because I'll include in this secular moral philosophy. Secular moral philosophy answers many of my questions about morality, and biology and history answer many of my questions about historical records and why humans exist the way they do. I think religion, from the research I've done, tends to answer many questions with itself. Like, religion is the reason for this because of religion. God is the answer to this question because of Jesus, or Jesus is the answer to this question because of God. And I think the difficulty I find is that science tends to lay out the whole process of reasoning behind each thing. They lay out the rules of physics and the rules of biology and such, whereas religion tends to say, what you should do in most instances is believe.
Science and morality and religion, real religion, really following Christ, do not contradict each other. Okay? Here's why. If I put strychnine in Grandma's tea, will she die?
9 times out of 10.
Correct. So science answers the question. Cliff, if you put strychnine in Grandma's tea, she will die. Can science answer the question in light of the fact that Grandma is loaded financially? Big bank account, big stock portfolio, and I will inherit it. In light of that, should I put strychnine in Grandma's tea or not? Can science answer that question?
Very controversially, I believe yes.
How on earth can science answer the question, in light of Grandma's wealth, why should I not put strychnine in her tea to get her wealth? How does that happen?
I believe science and biology tell us that we're community-based creatures, and it biologically incentivizes us to form communities, and that destroying a community by intentionally killing another person within that community, we are biologically incentivized not to do that.
If I lack money and I can get Grandma's money, and if it's all about survival and all about biology, I can promise you there ain't nothing wrong with putting strychnine in Grandma's tea in order to get her money sooner rather than later so I can provide for my family and myself. And if you're going to try and make a biological case for that, that's an exercise in futility. You can't do that, and you know that. Dr. Troy Vuris teaches chemistry at MIT. He stood up in front of the class one day and he said, "If you ask me, why is my shirt blue? I can answer you, if we extract the dye, we will find out why the shirt is blue. But if I tell you, my wife likes me in blue, that is an equally valid answer to your question, why is your shirt blue? Because my wife likes me in blue. One is a scientific explanation of why my shirt is blue. Another is a relational answer to the question, why is my shirt blue? Those are two different forms of knowledge. Third point, what is the smell of the color red? Stupid question, Cliff. Red does not have a smell. You are mixing your categories. Sir, science is a study of process, how something works. You also have the question of what is right, what is wrong. That is not a study of physical process. That's an ethical question, a moral question. It has nothing to do with science. Science is totally deaf, dumb, and mute on ethics and morality. It's impossible.
I think the thing that I am impressed and grateful for science of is saying, why is the question being asked, and what should be the process I use to come to an answer? And so I think with the putting a poison in your grandmother's tea, obviously you cannot ask science directly, is this a good or a bad idea? But you can ask science, well, why am I thinking about this at all? And science will tell you because you want the money, you want the resources, you want them sooner rather than later. And then science can also tell you what should be the process I use to come to a conclusion. And science can tell you, well, you're based on self-preservation, but also based on community preservation. So whatever decision reaches that goal the best would be the best decision to make. And I think that is where, although religion will tell you will sort of skip to the end and tell you this is the right decision to make based on an objective morality, I very much appreciate science for telling me here's every step but the very last one. You can take all of those facts in your own and make the decision based off of them.
You've totally mixed categories. You've jumped from science to philosophy like that in a blink of an eye. Sir, science has nothing to say whether I should put arsenic in my mother's tea tonight to get her money. But should I do that? Should I not do that? Is not a scientific question. It's a philosophical, ethical question. You're mixing categories, sir, because you got a conscience. And you're scrambling with everything in you as an atheist to justify what your conscience tells you is true. Don't put strychnine in grandma's tea to get her money. That is greedy, that is murder, that is self-absorption. But you see, your atheism is incompatible with the values that you hold dearly. And believe me, sir, I'm real glad you don't want to put strychnine in your grandma's tea, okay? I support you 110%. All I'm saying is you've wiped out the basis for making that decision when you say there is no God. Because if there is no God, morality is relative, which means if you want grandma's money badly enough, put the strychnine in her tea, get the inheritance, and you win the day. And it is survival of the fittest. In fact, do you know what the rest of the title of The Origin of the Species is? Would someone please quickly look that up on your phone? Charles Darwin wrote a book. The first words that we all know are The Origin of the Species. Now, would someone please read out loud the rest of that title? Quickly, can someone look that up?
On the origin of species by means of natural selection or the preservation of favored races in the struggle for life.
Oh. And do you know what Charles Darwin writes in that book? He writes, baboons, chimpanzees, Negroes, and Australian Aborigines are lower levels of this evolutionary cycle, and we do know the Western white European race ultimately will survive. Guys, if you can't see his rational consistency, you can't think straight. He's being totally logical, and it is scary, flat out evil. It is the basis for justifying eugenics, wiping out certain races because I think they're inferior. I think they're lower levels of the evolutionary cycle. And Jesus Christ contradicts that. And Jesus Christ says every single human being is created in the image of God. And I love every human being. I, God, love every human being so much so that I'm giving my life on a cross to forgive you, to save you, and to give you eternal life in heaven, because I affirm your life. And I don't care if you're an Australian Aborigine, a Negro, a white Caucasian, that is irrelevant. You're a human being created in the image of God. Sir, that's not science. That's philosophy, it's ethics. Which is more important? The love that your mom and dad have for you, that you have for others? Is that more important? Or is E equals MC squared more important?
On the Charles Darwin example,
yes.
Very clearly, I think he's bastardizing a true scientific theory to use it for things that make no sense. I'm sure you'd agree that this happens in religion all the time. I would conflate that with white Southerners in like the early American South using religion to justify something as horrible as slavery.
Slavery contradicts what Jesus said. Racism does not contradict what Darwin said.
Biology contradicts what Darwin said.
How does biology contradict racism?
There are no like biological significant differences by humans of different races that would cause certain of them to survive over others in a purely biological context. And we found that actually the thing that's caused them to not survive as much is societal factors created by men.
Sir, if it's survival of the fittest, if my race can survive and wipe out other races, what is the basis of you telling me that that's wrong? It's survival of the fittest.
By wrong, what do you mean by wrong? You're saying morally wrong or
morally wrong?
Actually incorrect.
Morally wrong. If I've got the guns, if I got the power, how are you going to scientifically tell me that it's wrong for me to wipe out other races?
Well, I think it's bad for humanity to kill humanity.
That's wonderful, your altruism. It's a great fantasy. Good luck with your fantasy.
Well, I feel like that's why I was saying, though, I believe there are biological processes that back that up. Things
No,
like
they're not. The Biological processes show survival of the fittest.
Sure, but survival of the fittest has now changed in the modern era, where one person could be extremely strong and extremely smart, born into an extremely poor community, and one person can be extremely unintelligent and extremely physically weak, born into an incredibly wealthy household, and one of them is much fitter than the other, and yet one of them will succeed much more than the other, and it is not at all based on survival of the fittest. It is based on constructs of society. So I'm saying that as interpretations of the Bible have warped and adapted over time to human development, our understandings of the ways in which biology affect people have warped and adapted to the modernity in society.
Aristotle said, every deformed child should be killed. Aristotle, the great Greek philosopher, every deformed child should be killed. Jesus Christ says you're wrong, because the value of a human being has nothing to do with their IQ, with whether they're deformed or not. We're human beings created in the image of God. Therefore, to kill deformed kids is murder, it's evil. To step on a cockroach to maintain cleanliness in my home is not evil. To step on her is absolutely evil.
And that's where I'd probably say I agree to disagree.
Okay.
Natural selection is survival of the fittest for the sacrifice of the weakest. Christianity is sacrificing the fittest for the survival of the weakest. Radical difference. Because human rights came from the Christian worldview. Infanticide was throughout the entire known world. Infanticide said as soon as it's exposed what gender the baby is, and if it's female, flush it down any type of cistern or leave it on a burn pile. Christianity came in and said, no, it's not about natural selection, survival of the fittest. It's not about the powerful eating the weak. It's about Jesus Christ humbling himself to the point of being a slave, saying slaves have value, children have values, the unborn have value, the aged have value who are dying away, so don't euthanize them. Everybody has value. She has more value than a cockroach. Natural selection says the opposite. And so if you're going to say it's natural selection and not Jesus Christ, and the Judeo-Christian values, I hate to say, my friend, but you are living by, even if you don't believe in Jesus Christ, you live by them. Otherwise, you wouldn't be saying what you're saying out here in terms of value, objective value, and morality, right? Okay, so I'm glad that you're admitting that you live like Jesus Christ, even though you don't believe in him. Okay, I would ask you and plead with you then, I know you're disagreeing with my father. We are not perfect in our thinking. But I would plead with you to go back to your dorm room or wherever you're going and to think about your worldview based out of natural selection when it comes to value of human life and morality, and if that truly jives with your experience and understanding of what truth is. Jesus Christ, who he is, his claims to be God and how he pulled it off through his resurrection, and how we live by his values, the whole value system, and how we live by the immaterial of wanting to sacrifice for the least of these, even across the sea, in Myanmar, for example, that came directly from Jesus Christ and his claims. All right, if we're going to live by natural selection, let's just be honest and stop doing that. Stop it all. So I believe you live by the understanding of what Jesus taught, who he was, that he wasn't a lunatic, that he wasn't a liar, that he wasn't just a legend, but he's the Lord of the entire universe, that he actually walked this planet, made these claims, and his book, the Bible, has been the bestseller every single week since it was written. Just a fact. And why is that? Because I believe it's the Word of God, and I believe Jesus was speaking truth. 66 books, historical documentation in nature, written over 1,400 years on 3 different continents, fitting together for some reason perfectly, getting the archaeology correct, getting the names correct, getting the ecology and environment correct. If you go over to Israel and you ask an atheist tour guide, can we go take a tour together? I guarantee you he will pull out the book of Acts and show you exactly where the archaeological digs are. None of this proves that the Christian faith is correct, but I hope you weigh the evidence over what we're talking about today, over your worldview and the worldview that Jesus Christ offers.
Hey guys, thanks so much for tuning in to this episode. Like and hit that subscribe button in order to join the family. Also want to invite you to our church where we pastor at in New Canaan, Connecticut. It's called Grace Community Church. We are currently meeting at a middle school, Saxe Middle School, and we start at 9:30 a.m. Hope to meet you there. See you soon.